We have a panel today that can speak to a good number of these because they have experience with a variety of different types of student populations on our campus. Panel members, we have from right to left, Catherine Beasley, who is the coordinator of the Undocumented Student Program. Then we have Emily Everett, who is the director of the African American Resource Center in the Cultural Center. And we have Nancy Matthews, who is both a professor in Justice Studies as well as the coordinator of Women's Studies.
I'm Catherine Greenslade. I'm the coordinator for the project. The project was funded through one of the innovation grants last year, well, 2012 in the fall, and then I've been here since January of last year. Outside of here, I'm an immigration attorney. I have my own private practice. I'm only here 2 days a week for now. So the project has a few goals. The main one being making sure that we're creating an open and supportive campus environment for our undocumented students. A way to do that, we thought, was to make sure faculty and staff have the information and resources they need to help those students. So we have created a resource guide, which looks like this. You may have seen it. It's also online in a PDF form at neiu.edu/undocumented students. And then the other thing we did was we created an ally program, which is a half-day session where you can come and get information about how to support those students, about some of the legal challenges that those students face, our admissions and financial aid policies that affect those students. And then when you're done, you get a lovely one of these that you put in your office so that those students know that you're somebody that it's safe to talk to. Because one of the biggest concerns for students is who it's safe to tell. They live in a lot of fear, so they're often hesitant to come forward and talk to somebody and tell them they're undocumented. We can't really force that, but I think if we make it, a safe environment, students will feel more comfortable asking. Well, the biggest challenge that comes up with these students is affording college. They're not eligible for state or federal financial aid, so paying for college becomes very tough. And I would say one of the biggest ways that faculty and staff can help out is getting to know the students so they can write good letters of recommendation, because they rely very heavily on scholarships. It's scholarships or 3 jobs to pay for school. They can get in-state tuition in Illinois. There are about 16 states that allow for in-state tuition. Illinois is one of them. But even paying in-state tuition out of pocket can be expensive. The other challenge I think that really comes up for these students is a lot of times because they have 3 jobs, they're not participating a lot in other campus activities. They tend to come, go to class, and leave because they have to get to whatever the next thing is they're doing. So again, the more scholarships they can get, the less time they have to spend working, and hopefully they can spend more time participating in the rest of campus life.
Can you summarize kind of what their family situation is like?
Well, at Northeastern we have 2 types. We have both students who are undocumented and probably have undocumented family members, or sometimes we have a lot of students here who are U.S. citizens but have undocumented parents or undocumented older siblings. For the undocumented students where it's a whole family group, there's concern about deportation for not just yourself but your whole family. But even for our U.S. citizen students, there's often a lot of pressure or concern because, they get to stay here and they have all the rights and privileges that come with being a citizen, but they're the only one in the family, or maybe them and some of their younger siblings, but their parents and their older siblings don't have those options. And they also often face a lot of pressure to be the guide for the family, they're the person who fills out all the forms or takes care of all the signs everything, or takes care of the legal whatever because they have the citizenship.
Any of them totally independent? Here on their own, totally on their own?
Sure.
I mean, is there a balance? Can you give us any sort of relationship between those groups at all?
I don't know specifically at Northeastern what the breakdown would be of students who are here with their family versus here on their own. But certainly that does happen, that people come maybe as a young teenager by themselves, and then they're here either without any family, or sometimes maybe they have other relatives that are here, like a cousin who's here, or an aunt or an uncle, but their immediate family is still in their home country.
Do we know the approximate numbers of our students that are undocumented here on campus?
In the last fall, those who self-selected, on the admissions application, there's a box that says non-citizen if no other categories apply. So you have a million choices of visa type and things that you might have, and then if you get to the end and you're not any of those, that would be the indicator. We had 250 students in the fall who self-selected, and I suspect that we have more because that's if they chose to disclose when they applied. If they didn't, then we have no way to track who they are.
It's 250 for the whole campus, not just the newcomer students.
No, for the whole campus, yeah. I think of those, 70, around 70 were new students in the fall, and the others were continuing. Yeah.
One, this might be a little naive of me, I'm not sure, but I presume that there's no obligation for faculty to be mandatory reporters if someone tells you the student under no legal obligation to share
No.
anything.
You are not a mandatory reporter in any way. It's not like an abuse situation where you're required to disclose.
Great. And the other question was, I was just reading about the scholarship opportunities, one of them being the Illinois Freedom Fund Act. Are there other major ones that we should be aware of? Is it all students up
That's
for
the only
scholarships?
one currently that's only for undocumented students. That was created in 2000, was passed in 2011, but last year was the first year that they started awarding scholarships. They have 2-year and 4-year awards, and then they have a few that are just like one-time awards. It's privately funded, so part of it is just getting enough private donations to make it work. And it's right now only for undergraduates, but their goal would be, as soon as there is more money, that they would open it up to graduate students as well. I should just say briefly, you will now see that some undocumented students, by executive memorandum in 2012, Obama came out with Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, which basically is use of prosecutorial discretion. We know you're here, you're just not a priority to be deported. But in exchange for that, you get a 2-year work permit. So we now have a lot of students who qualified for that and will have that. So if students have that, they can't participate in any federally funded programs, so like work study wouldn't be an option, but they can get hired for student aid or extra help positions and things like that. But yeah, basically they get a work permit, and with that they can get a social security number and a driver's license. So that's a big help to a lot of the students. I should say one of the other, I guess, maybe emotional concerns that comes up with these students is a lot of times they don't know they're undocumented until it's time to go get a driver's license when they're in high school, or it's time to apply to college, and their parent, either because they want to go participate in driver's ed and they can't, or everybody's at college or at high school is learning about like workshops on how to fill out your FAFSA, and then their parents tell them, well, they can't fill one out. Because if they came here as really small children, a lot of times they've lived their whole life assuming they're a U.S. citizen, only to find out like right before they go to college that they're not. A lot of them are still kind of trying to sort through that as they navigate college as well. And most of them are first-generation college goers, so they also don't have a lot of support structure at home because their parents have limited English proficiency often and limited schooling as well.
Is there any downside for a student to volunteer to become part of DACA? I mean, is there, in the long term, are they most likely to get deported at some point by being?
The downside is it's not a law, so it doesn't have to be renewed. Recently, they've started, USCIS is right now sorting out how the renewal process will work, because people who applied in 2012 are now up for renewal. But it was created by memo, not by law, so, you know, if the presidency changed it, I mean, they could just disband with the program. So the downside
Recommend
is,
students to do it or not do it if they're not?
do I
Would you
recommend?
to a student
Yes.
who's not yet part of it to try to become part of it?
Yes, I do, assuming they meet the criteria and they don't have any, you know, like, there's a lot of criteria, but things that would exclude you would be like prior criminal history, or, and like, if you have those things, announcing that you're here now puts you at more risk of being deported.
Is there any protection for the people that declare themselves and apply for DACA for later if
No.
there's a change in, there's no protection?
Just high risk.
And it's not a path to citizenship. It's not like once you have this, eventually you could get a green card. That you have this for 2 years. As long as the program exists, you can keep renewing it. So yeah, no, there's not really. But what it does allow them is to be able to work legally, which is a big help. So that you can stop having job, like you can have a job that pays better, or for those who work, right, or for those who graduate from college, they can actually work in their field of study, rather than whoever will pay them cash, or some sort of, or working with somebody else's social security number, or whatever other means of working.
My name is Kim Everett, and I'm here from the Pedroso Center. The Pedroso Center opened up 2.5 years ago in B159, and I like to describe the Pedroso Center in 3 parts. We have the space. If you all have not been by there, it is an absolutely beautiful space. But besides the space, it's also the people, and housed within the Pedroso Center are 5 resource centers. We began initially as a race-based cultural center with the African and African American Resource Center, the Asian and Global Resource Center, and the Latino Resource Center. In the last 2 years, we've expanded to include the LGBTQA Resource Center as well as the Women's Resource Center. And so each of those centers has a director like myself, and so that's the people. And then the third part are the programs. Our programs range in a variety from event-specific things that bring awareness and celebrate different cultures on campus, but we also have a number of programs that focus more on advocacy and support besides the one-day programs that you may see. So that's a vein of the Pedroso Center that a lot of people may not be aware of, is our advocacy and of what we do. I know that our Latino Resource Center has worked closely in the process and thinking through some of the ally training in the very beginning. We also have worked to make sure that there are spaces for lactation or other concerns through our Women's Resource Center. Working with one of our directors, there's now a question on the admissions application that includes sexual orientation and gender identity more inclusively. So those are some of the policy things we do. I get to work this semester with a group who's exploring ways to better support the needs of African American students. So those are sort of broadly the things that we do. But the way we go about things is completely intersectional. And so by intersectional, we mean we look at all parts of the student, and we don't really isolate their varying identities in different ways. So if we're working with a student, we don't necessarily funnel them into a specific door. We think about all of these different things and how race, gender, class, sexual orientation, citizen status, all of those different things come to play in educational experience. And so the programs that we present are toward that end, and the way that we work with individual students is also toward that end. So that's one of the things that we want more of our campus community to think about, the intersecting identities and how these different identities come together and create a unique experience based on it. One of the other things that we talk about in the Pedroso Center is moving away from a deficit framework. Thinking about, as opposed to what's wrong with our marginalized students, thinking about what social capital they do have and what cultural capital they do have, as well as what we as a university can do to ask what's wrong with us, as opposed to what's wrong with them, and how we can be a better support.
So these other needs, these other groups, are there directors of those sections as well?
Yes, there are 5 directors, myself, African American Resource Center. Yasmin Rainey is the director of the Asian and Global Resource Center. Maria Hanau Holmes is the director of the Latino Resource Center. Joanna Snotter is the director of the Women's Resource Center, and Anthony Capini is the director of the LGBTQA Resource Center. In addition to that, we have an assistant vice president for student affairs. Juan Guardia provides leadership to the Pedroso Center. And then there are a few also support staff and student aides who work there with us as well. Right now, as I said, we started out with 3 centers. So at this point, Joanna and Anthony, their offices are housed in a different part of the B Wing. They're in the suite along with career services and advising. But in the near future, we hope, there'll be an expansion of the B Wing so that we will all be housed together in one space.
How do you envision the involvement of faculty in your activities?
There's a number of ways faculty can become involved. One of which is to refer students to us in general as a space and a place where they can come together. There's one perception often with marginalized students. This can be sort of a rallying place where they can come and see and have conversations with people that they may identify with based on that marginalized identity. Another opportunity is we have a number of programs. You all probably see 600,000 targeted announcements that come out from the Pedroso Center. So when there are relevant topics to your classes, you can send your students to there. And we also have had opportunity where we can build very specific and intentional in co-curricular collaborations. One in particular comes to mind with the music and dance department and their FYE students. We are happy to invite you to the programs that we're already doing and include your classes there, but we would much rather build a deeper, more connected curricular experience with the faculty. 3 primary ways: referring students to us to use the space and the people there, to invite your classes to the programs that we already have existing. And if you have something that you want to share with the campus community that may be beyond the scope of your regular classroom activities, then we can provide a platform for that as well.
I think there are certain departments and programs that have kind of a natural relationship with the programs here. So for example, for me, working with women's and gender studies, we've worked with both the Women's Resource Center and the African American Resource Center to put on annually. We've done the Black Women's Leadership Summit for the last week, just did our 3rd one a couple weeks ago.
Again, there are the obvious fits where, like Justice Studies, Women and Gender Studies, YAS, AFAM, those programs, but there are fits all over the place as well. We also recently had a collaborative program with the Student Center for Science Engagement where we looked at the craftier side of math was the name of the event. And so thinking about inclusion and identity formation within sciences and math as well, places where it may not seem so obvious, but there's always a way to tie in culture and identity into every subject matter if we're interested in doing so.
How could departments where there isn't that, there hasn't historically been that natural, how could they benefit from using the resources of the Pedroso Center? So just taking my own discipline as a sort of like looking place for this, right? Philosophy is historically not the place where folks who feel like they're marginalized at the university, because there's almost no representation in the field itself, right? And so we have students who are going into who feel marginalized at the university, and then they're interested in going into a field that further that right. How does the Pedroso Center link up both with their academic success while they're here at NAU, and maybe even further, like in terms of like them going on?
Again, I'll give the example of the Student Center for Science Engagement and have this conversation with them to talk about ways in which we can think about serving the needs of diverse student populations. So there's, of course, the curricular, you can add the diversity within your curriculum, but as you're thinking about working with students, we can come in and have conversations with the department of, let's think about reframing how we approach our work with marginalized students from this deficit to an asset-based approach as well. And again, many of the things that I talk about are best practices for working with students, generally speaking, but there are some ways in which these things are attached to particular populations. and understanding the thoughts about intersectionality. It would be better for us to come in and have the conversation, and we could think about a number of ways that we can work through that. An understanding to start with that we have very few, we'll say students of color, particularly right now, but that doesn't mean that that point of view shouldn't be included in what we're doing here. It also doesn't mean that there shouldn't be some conversations in the classroom about diversity. And for the ones that we do have here with us, let's think about the way we're framing our conversations and understanding how we talk to and with and communicate how this university works, and understand that there's a cultural lens that comes along with that.
Can you maybe mention a few of the kinds of, what I call it, issues maybe that some of the students come to you with, that they have with the campus, maybe even with their classes? What would be of some interest to you?
Well, there is the constant concern about was that racist? So that microaggression sort of things, those little things that make you say, was I treated in this way because I am fill in the blank? Whichever identity may be most salient at that point. You all already know this when there are conversations about Latina students to turn to the Latina and say, how do you feel about this? Those sorts of example and speaking for the entire group. And you as faculty members, I assume, will never do such a thing. But when those things come up with students, if another student were to do that, and the student who was the target there may not feel like the faculty member adequately addressed that. So sort of thinking about ahead of time, if this happens in my classroom, how will this go? Or the idea of lowered expectations of academic performance based on race or ethnicity. Another instance where students of marginalized identities may feel either invisible in the classroom, like the conversations are completely uncomfortable to acknowledge that this person is here and that their experience may be different, or they're hyper visible and they're again looked at as the beacon of whatever that identity is. So realizing and recognizing those sorts of dynamics that happen in the classroom and being ready to address one of those.
My name is Nancy Matthews, and I've been a faculty member here since '95. So I think a lot of what I would say about advising would overlap a lot with what Kim has said and Catherine. Advising is one of my favorite parts of our job. I guess one key word for me is to be holistic. That's all really important to know, and that, you get to know that better the more you do it as you're here longer, and you kind of, get to know the rules and the exceptions to the rules, because there are always exceptions, and how to be a rule user, not just a rule follower, but being holistic about the person who is before you and that you're working with, I think is really important. Be a good listener, not just to be the one to do all the talking. And these are, as Kim said, these are like principles for working with all students. And don't make assumptions. That was one of your themes, and I think it's really, that has been my experience too. You see someone's outward appearance, and you've met them in class perhaps, and you might have, there's some sociologist, I forget who uses the term typifications. It's like a word that's different from stereotyping, but that's like a normal part of how we think. We try to figure out who it is. We all do that in our normal thinking, but the issue to me is you don't assume that your assumptions are correct, and don't let those assumptions determine all of your interaction with the student. So I wanted to ask you all a question. Most of us have gone through a lot of graduate education, and the relationship with the advisor is often, can be fairly close, can be a pretty significant relationship, or not. But I wonder, what do you remember from your undergraduate days? What do you remember about advising that you received as undergraduates? For me, what I remember most, I went to a very small liberal arts college. I actually started at a big university and didn't choose a major, so I got assigned a random advisor who was a faculty member, and it was someone who was like totally not in my interest area. So I decided when I transferred to a smaller college that I was going to declare a major even if I wasn't going to stick with it, so that I would get at least an advisor who was in my field. So I ended up as a sociologist. I had the benefit of a lot of, the advising was more informal and holistic, and that really attributed to my development as an adult, as a person, to have someone to talk through life issues. One thing at the undocumented student training, Anthony Pini, who's the director of the LGBTQ Center. One of the things he said at the training the other day that was interesting was like, a lot of times students have an issue that they want to talk about, some significant, sometimes life issue, whether it's coming out as an LG or B or T person, or some other thing, something that's just bothering them. And that sometimes they have to approach it very indirectly, and I think he said sometimes it takes 7 kind of.
Yeah, it's like on average, it will be 7 interactions with you before they're gonna actually talk to you about whatever it is they really
about
want to
the
talk to you
really
about.
important.
Yeah.
I wanted to just touch on some of the issues that I've encountered with students. First of all, being an open person and inviting your advisees to come see you, and that they don't have to have a specific question. Just come in and let's just talk. Let's just chat. Which I know we all have different personalities. Some of us that's easier to do than others, but I think it's worthwhile. Some of the resources that our students often need, some of the big issues that I've encountered over the years. Number one, violence in their lives. I was part of a research community a few years ago, and we surveyed the NEIU student body on experiences of violence. And it's up to 80-some% of our students have had some kind of experience with violence in their lives, whether it's peer-to-peer violence as teenagers, whether it's domestic violence that is sometimes ongoing, whether it's sexual abuse in their past or even current lives. So violence is a big issue, and students often have not gotten assistance with kind of dealing with the trauma that sometimes causes. Financial stress is a huge issue. Not being able to, waiting for, you have a hold on your account. Your classes didn't get canceled, but because you still have a hold because you owe money from last semester, your book waiver hasn't been released. So you can't buy your books for this semester. Family conflict, or family responsibilities. I have to miss class because I'm taking care of grandma is seriously ill, and I'm the one who has to take her for the treatments and the doctor's appointments. Students' own health problems. I have 2 students in one of my classes this semester who both have serious health problems and have been, desperately trying to make it work, but we're making arrangements. So that's what I mean about being rule users. Sometimes you have to figure out ways around the rules to, help a student who might not normally qualify for an incomplete to do an incomplete anyway and make up the course another semester in non-traditional ways. I think in the kind of stereotypical or the traditional, idea of a college student with, a residential college who's between 18 and 22, one of the big issues is supposedly their relationships. That's probably been the least common issue among students for me. Now that may just be that my students don't talk to me about that, but that's what I've run into the least. It's been much more like violence, finances, health. And so it's wonderful we now have the Pedroso Center people who are resources that, you can refer students to. We have a counseling service. They're overextended, but they're all, if you have a student in crisis, learn how to get to the counseling center so you can walk them over there. And if it's an emergency, they will, you can get a student in immediately. Our health service, I believe, is improving. We're under a lot of pressure from the university to try to get students to register for their classes and keep going and be full-time with 12 credit hours and so on. I often tell students, sometimes it's better to be part-time and take longer if you're working that much and you can't do your coursework. And, that's a conflict between me advising about what I think is good for them and help them, like, let go of that idea that they have to be full-time, versus the university's message of trying to get, students to be registered.
I really enjoy what you're saying about meeting with students and what things they may want to talk about. And whether you're advising or not, for me, that's the opportunity to make them feel like this is your school experience is personal. I remember being in school and thinking, nobody knows my name here. Like I'm just a part of the crowd. But I think when they come to your office and maybe tell you something personal, then they know, hey, there's somebody here who's keeping track of me. And a lot of these people, just to have someone feel like someone's keeping track of them because they're keeping track of maybe family members, that really helps them in the class. I feel like their school experience is something of a personal experience, whether you're advising or not.
And that makes me think about something like, communicate how this place works to students. Like, what is the purpose of office hours? Why would I ever go into a faculty member's office to talk to them? Like, what is the purpose of office hours and advising and being sure that that is clear and explicit?
Yeah.
We understand the benefit, but that's not necessarily communicated